So now I'm recording. Here I am. I'm going to share the screen. Let's see if this works. Sure, let's go with that. Oh, okay. Boom. So we have this. So you all should see me. There it goes. So that worked. Okay. So let's watch. So today's lecture, Facebook, access and security. And we'll make a little dent in this, but we'll finish up most of it next week. So just to introduce the topic, what we'll introduce things like passwords, authentication, and encryption. Eventually, we'll talk about some different types of attacks, some basic ones that you've probably heard of, like phishing, onto things like distributed denial of service and maybe cross-site scripting attacks, stuff like that. We'll discuss some notable attacks and vulnerabilities that Facebook has experienced, some of them as fun stories, and then finally close out with motivation of attackers and what you can do as defenders. So, security and access are closely related and, roughly speaking, two sides of the same coin. So security basically means keeping the bad guys out, keeping other people from viewing your data or tampering with your data, right? Altering the contents of an email, for example, or interfering with your access to your own data. So security means preventing all the bad guys from doing bad guy stuff. Access, on the other hand, means letting the good guys do their good stuff. For example, you as a user ought to be able to view your own data, ought to be able to update your data. Now, both of those are permission-based. The essential rule is there's some sort of access credential. If you have it, you're authorized to do the correct things. If you don't have it, you're not authorized to take actions. So, security and access, closely related, but they are separate. Now, the basic categories of security threats: physical, personnel, and software. Now, of course, this is an IT course, right? IDS 200. So we're going to be focusing on software. But it's important to realize that these other two, physical and personnel, are issues as well. So physical security threats, for example, just means the physical facilities, the actual hardware that the data is stored on. For example, suppose you have absolutely perfect security on some sort of network system where you have sensitive data stored. Well, guess what? Somebody can still break into the building and steal those hard drives physically out of the machines, right? That's physical security. Likewise, personnel. You may say, well, our building is totally secure, right? It has super high-grade battleship steel walls, and it's earthquake-proof, and nothing's going to wreck it, and our software protection is the best it could ever be. Nobody's getting through there. But guess what? You got a security guard, and he's only getting paid $10 an hour, and he has a grievance, and he's got medical bills, and he likes to have whatever. He's got expensive tastes, so he takes a little money on the side and smuggles out one of those hard drives to somebody. That's a personnel issue. So any of these things, physical, personnel, software, they can be the point of vulnerability for a breach. And of course, some attacks can span multiple categories. For example, the big ones that targeted Target and Home Depot some years ago and resulted in having all those chips in our credit cards, that was based on a combination of those things. So they were physical devices that they put in all the point of sale, the purchase points, that equipment, and there was also a software-based attack where they broke into the system through a vendor that was doing work with Target that didn't have especially good security. So combination of those two can be often very severe. All right, now first thing, we can take this as a dogma. Perfect security is impossible. You can have really, 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 really good security, so good that nobody's going to bother attacking you through that particular mechanism. But perfect security is impossible. Simple reason is any system that's usable has to have some means of access, right? Basically, has to have the keys. If somebody's going to get in to do their good stuff, there has to be some mechanism that allows them to do it. And if the keys exist, well, guess what? The bad guys can guess at what the key is. They can somehow make a copy of it. They can steal the keys. They can co-opt them, right? They can use them for their unintended purpose. They can snag some other feature that simulates the keys, or they can access a storage device where the keys are contained, whatever. They can somehow get hold of them. If the keys exist, somebody can get that. So, examples of that. Password hacking, right? Somebody just guesses at the password, makes a wild-ass guess that is perhaps luckily correct, or uses some knowledge about the person, right? This is what you always see in the TV shows. The FBI guys, they go to the criminal's house and his computer is there, and it's, you know, got like a four number passcode on it, and they think of like, well, his dog's birthday is May 1st, so let's type in 0501, and bing, it opens up, right? So yeah, that sort of thing does sometimes happen, but not as much as it used to. Password document theft, right? Imagine if you have some sort of list of all your passwords, or if you have passwords stored on your device. Well, somebody who gets your device or gets that list can lift all your passwords. And of course, computers left unattended while somebody's logged in, right? Again, this is something you sometimes see on the TV shows. I forget, I just saw this in a TV show the other day, some cop show where dude wanted to see what was on the computer, and so he like made a little bit of a ruckus, and the person at the desk like had to wander away to deal with it, and then he looked in and said, oh, that's where my stuff is. So yeah, people do that. Now, in general, again, perfect security is impossible. So even if one of those aspects, like the password is super strong, or you have good security around leaving your computer unattended, there's always going to be a weakest point in the system. For example, if you make a bank that has a super tough vault door that's, you know, again, made out of like 24-inch thick steel, and nobody's cutting through that in any reasonable amount of time, well, guess what? The bad guys may find a way to cut through the walls or cut through the ceiling. There's an article here, if you choose to look at it, some bank thieves, they went through roofs and walls to steal millions. Basically, it was up in Canada. It was a long weekend. The bank was located on the lower floor of a building. So the bad guys, they set up a tent like they were maintenance guys on the top of the building. And during this long weekend where everybody was gone, they knew where the room was with the safe deposit boxes. They drilled down through the ceiling, the roof, and then through the ceiling of the bank, and boop, they're right there in the middle of all the deposit boxes, and they have a few days to pick and choose all the good stuff from them. And they would have gotten away with it if one of their guys didn't squeal to the cops. Okay, but of course, bank robbery is wrong, but there you go. Perfect security is not really possible. Okay, security and access are both provided by an application-specific set of permission rules. Basically, whatever application you're doing, you're going to have some set of rules that people use to determine whether they're the good guy who has access or the bad guy who shouldn't have access. So common one is the user interface, right? You enter in a user ID and a password, and then somewhere in the back of the system, it checks whether that pair matches the database record. You can also have backup things. For example, security questions, right? Things like your mother's maiden name or what street you lived on in 3rd grade, things like that. The other part is the back end area. Not everybody is going to have access to every part of the system, right? There's going to be grades of permission. For example, when you guys use Blackboard, you can see the student stuff. You can see your own part of gradebook, for example, what your grades are, and you can see course content, but you don't have permission to edit stuff in there. Likewise, as an instructor, I can add in new content. I can post up lectures. I have access to everybody's gradebook detail. So different users will have different levels of permission. At any rate, if the access conditions are met, user gets granted access according to that account's permission level, right? So I'm faculty. I have what's called instructor access in Blackboard. You all are students. You have student access in Blackboard. Okay. Now, Facebook in particular, Facebook does delegate some permission granting to its users. For example, when you get on Facebook, there's certain things that are just part of the core Facebook experience, right? So the posting, the newsfeed, the ability to upload pictures, those are there for everybody. Other things like Instant Messenger, you have the option to include that. Any of the side apps that go along with Facebook, you have the option to include them. So yeah, some is given to users. You can, opt in or just not use them. Of course, there are other things when you're posting content and you want to decide who gets to see it, right? So if you have some pictures from a party and you're fine with all your friends seeing it, but maybe you don't want your 95-year-old grandmother to see them because, she'd be horrified, you can post things in that way. You can say, well, this is only specified for, my close friends, not my older relatives group. And of course, these days you can define your groups and you can set up overlapping groups. So for example, you might have some relatives that are about your age that you include in good friends, even though they're family. And you might have another one that's just all for family, like notifications about family holiday togethers, things like that, that you don't put all your friends on. Anyway, so how it works in Facebook, when they construct your feed, right, all the stuff you see, all the content has a permission type in some data. And essentially, content that's not visible to you, for example, it's something that one of your friends has posted, but they've opted to keep it private or not reveal it to you, that just won't be part of your feed, even though it might go through the ranking system and say, this is something that normally we would show you, except the person has made it only visible to a subset of users. So when that happens, Facebook constructs the web page that only includes permitted content. So that's how it works in Facebook. Now, security, how Facebook users experience it. So the main access method is the combination of email and password, right? And we're very familiar with this. So there are some details about that, about what is required for a password. Things like a length requirement, how many characters does it have to be, requirements around a character mix, right? You commonly see things like there has to be one uppercase, one lowercase, one number, and one punctuation or special character. And then other questions about the periodic update. How often does it have to be changed? Then there are backup mechanisms, the security questions, and maybe a phone number if you want to include those. So Facebook, again, primarily email and password, but there are some supplementary access mechanisms. Passwords are divided into weak and strong. So a weak password, what we mean by when a password is weak, be relatively easy to guess by someone. So, for example, a single letter password would be, theoretically possible, but very easy to guess, right? Or a simple numeric password. So a simple sequence like 1234 or 8888. And in fact, a lot of password generation, password permission levels will specifically block out things like that. So I just signed up with a different platform today. I'm developing some textbook content on the side. And in their system for their password, they specifically say they have an option to say you can have so many numbers in a sequence, right? And you get to pick how many you have in a sequence, or you can opt out other simple things. So simple, weak passwords, anything short and including just letters, that's going to be relatively easy to guess. Even if you're not going to guess it on the first time, right? You have a few tries. Other things, anything involving complete words. So let me put this in Paint. It's easier to talk about. For just words, you have what's called a dictionary attack. Okay, so if my password is, I don't know, let's say brown dog, right? Well, somebody, even though brown dog, just in terms of randomly guessing that string, that's going to be pretty unlikely. However, what a dictionary attack would do is basically test all combinations of two words. And if you figure the dictionary has about, I don't know, maybe 100K words altogether, then this number, which is tremendously large, right? This is many billions of possibilities. This one is going to be a lot less, right? 100,000 squared, 100K times 100K. Even though it sounds like a huge number, right? A million, I don't know. What is that? 10,000, 10 billion possibilities? Okay. 10 billion possibilities. Here's the problem. There are, 2+ billion accounts on Facebook. So sure, you're not going to get everybody, but these dictionary attack guys, they can target Facebook and get a few hits. They can target any other site and get a few hits. Okay, so the dictionary attack was a popular thing. So even though, again, there are billions of possibilities, well, if they try every possibility, several times a day or a few times a day, eventually they'll come up with a pretty decent stack of these these cracked passwords. So even though a dictionary attack has a low success rate against any one user, in aggregate, the attackers can get quite a few password credentials. Okay, so that's the problem with a dictionary attack. That's why they don't want you to just use simple words in your password, is because it makes them a lot weaker. Okay, so other risk factors, anything that's derived from personal information, for example, the name of your dog and his birthday, right? Or the name of your kids and their birthday, or your wife and her anniversary, whatever. Other things used on other sites, right? So you may have a password that you're using on a site that's pretty secure, but it might be used on a site that's not very secure as well. And if the hackers access that, well, guess what they're going to do? They're going to try it out on a lot of other sites. So, for example, password hacked on low importance site, but used on another site, like what? Like Facebook or Google or your bank or your credit card or your investment accounts or whatever, right? Retail sites, okay? Any of those could be compromised. In fact, this happened to me once. A couple of years ago, I had a threatening email. I was looking in my spam folder for one of my classes while I was discussing spam folder stuff. And there was a thing in there that had a password that I used, and it had like right in the thing. So that was to get your attention. The bad guy said, "We have your password, we know." And I thought it was strange because I hadn't used that password in a while. I had updated it, in between. I still did use it on some garbage sites that I didn't care about. Uh, you know, I don't even remember, like some kind of quiz site or something. Anyway, but for a little while, yeah, I was using it on my bank account, but I switched it over anyway. So they sent me this nasty email and they said, we have your password and we have incriminating information on you, and just so you know, blah 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 blah. And if don't send us $1,000 worth of Bitcoin, we're gonna hack into your stuff and ruin your life. Anyway, it's kind of silly, but they send that message out to a bunch of people, right? Yeah, probably some people do sell them Bitcoin or send them some Bitcoin, because cyber extortion is a real thing. Anyway, so that's one of the things they could do on it. Okay, so those are some risk factors, right? Derived from personal information used on other sites, or infrequently or never change. Let me build on that. One of the practical realities of password theft, most of the hackers who steal the passwords don't want to actually use them. Okay? Instead, if they're bad dudes, they sell batches of them to criminals. Okay, which I guess makes the hackers themselves criminals, but still, they don't want to use them directly. So they sell batches of them to criminals. So what happens in practice? The hackers spend weeks or months gathering passwords. Once they have enough, they sell them in batches on the dark web, which we'll eventually talk about later in the course. So they sell them on batches on the dark web, like, hey, I got, 500 passwords to Bank of America or something. I'll sell them for $1,000, or I'll sell them for, $10,000, whatever. So they sell them in batches on the dark web. But again, the end-to-end process could take months. So if you change your password reasonably frequently, like every few months, in most cases, you should be okay, even if a bad guy somehow gets your password. Okay, so that's an important thing to keep in mind. So if you go to something and you suspect you've been phished, by all means, go change your password the same day. You'll probably be safe. Okay, so we'll do a couple more slides, then we'll wrap it up for this. So strong passwords, the ideal, long randomized string of numbers, upper and lowercase letters, punctuation, and symbols, unrelated to prior passwords. For example, if your prior password is Doug1234, you don't want to have your next password be Doug1235, right? Because the hackers that got your old one, right, when they see a password that ends in a couple numbers, they're going to get it and try the next number in the sequence. Number two should be specific to Facebook, right? Don't use it on other sites. So the advantage of this long password is it's practically impossible to guess in time to be usable or before the account is locked, right? If Facebook says you can only make 5 bad password guesses before your account is locked, that's going to be a big hassle. So nobody's going to be able to guess this long random password in 5 guesses, right? I mean, yeah, it's theoretically possible. There's a non-zero possibility, but the hackers aren't going to waste their time doing that when there are so many better options available, like phishing attacks. The disadvantage of the strong password, of course, it's very difficult to remember unless you're robot-like, but most of us aren't robot-like. So long random password, very secure, but also very difficult to remember, which creates the problem that you're in practice going to either need to store it on your device or write it down somewhere, which creates its own vulnerability. Okay. And if you wanted to express that as a number, the probability of randomly guessing it would be n to the power negative c, where n is the number of different characters that you can have for each character, and c is the length of the password, the number of characters. So if, for example, you have 100 different options for each character, right, upper lowercase letters, numbers, special characters, and your password is 10 characters long, you would have 100 to the negative what? Did I say 10? 10 characters. 100 to the negative 10, or basically 10 to the negative 20th, a 1 in 10 to the 20th possibility of randomly guessing it. Basically, it's not going to happen. Okay. So as a follow-up to this, right, Facebook uses something called multi-factor authentication, not just Facebook, other places. So for better security, right, you need not only your password, but some other credential. It could be a text, code delivered through a text message, or access to a particular device. For example, for UIC, when they do multi-factor authentication, if employees want to look at their payroll information, the multi-factor, the second factor, is just being directly connected to the UIC network. So if you're on campus, you can just log in with your net ID and password, and you can get in and see all your stuff. But if you're sitting at home, that's not going to work. They say, well, we don't know. You're not at UIC, so you could be anybody. They make you, they send you a text, they text you a code and make you enter it in, and that's your second factor authentication. So usefulness of multi-factor, it's great if it's some random bad dude on the other side of the world that tries to log into your account knowing your email address and your password, right? But it's not going to save you in the case if your password is locally saved and that random person steals your smartphone, right? If you're on the train, somebody steals your smartphone out of your pocket and you don't have it password protected, yeah, they're going to have access to all that stuff you have on your phone. Of course, if somebody does steal your phone, then your Facebook account may be a relatively minor concern. Also, people can easily be fooled. So we had the thing around the last election with the hackers attacking the Democratic national headquarters. Yeah, so basically, they put in some fraudulent email saying you need to update your password, and the dude who was running the site, who was running the accounts that day, they had some intern on Sunday morning. He accidentally clicked the wrong box, and instead of saying ignore this, right, he sent it to the higher up, the DNC chair, and said, nope, you need to respond to this. You need to go in there and update your password. So the dude went in there and updated his password and basically gave away the keys to the system. So multi-factor authentication isn't going to save you from carelessness. All right, seems like a good point to break. We'll come back on the next week. We'll talk about encryption and stuff. But this is a good break point, so that's where I'm going to stop.